Okay, we're going to try something, well, kind of impossible. We're going to take 5,000 years of pharaohs, pyramids, and wild power struggles and boil it all down into one 5-minute explainer. Ready? Let's dive in. First off, let's just try to wrap our heads around that number. We're not talking about a couple hundred years. We are talking about 5,000 years of history. I mean, think about that. It's a timeline stretching from way back in 3000 BC all the way until the Romans showed up. And in that time, an incredible 30 distinct dynasties of rulers. So how do you even make sense of all that time? Well, lucky for us, historians break it into 3 major periods. First, you've got the Old Kingdom. This is the age of the great pyramid builders. Then comes the Middle Kingdom, a time of reunification and a real cultural boom. And finally, you get the New Kingdom, Egypt's golden age as a massive, powerful empire, right before it all ends with the Roman conquest. So that's our roadmap. So here's the big question, right? How on earth does a civilization thrive for thousands of years in the middle of a desert? It seems impossible. Well, the answer is actually pretty simple, and it all comes down to one incredible force of nature. This famous quote says it all. The entire civilization, everything they accomplished, was built on the totally predictable annual flooding of the Nile River. Every single year, like clockwork, the river would overflow, and when the waters went down, they left behind this layer of rich, black, super fertile soil. Without that gift, you've got no farms, no food, and, well, no ancient Egypt. Now, when you think of the Old Kingdom, you think pyramids, of course. And the biggest question people always have is, who actually built these things? Well, the answer might surprise you, and it's time we busted a pretty popular myth. Yeah, the whole idea that they were built by slaves or, aliens is pure Hollywood. The archaeological evidence tells a completely different story. The pyramids were built by skilled Egyptian citizens. These were farmers who, during that Nile flood season, couldn't work their fields anyway because they were underwater. So the state essentially put them to work on these massive national projects and paid them in food and housing. All right, let's jump forward now to the New Kingdom. This is Egypt at its absolute peak, a true empire. And this is where the story gets really dramatic. We're talking about a high-stakes power struggle between the pharaoh and his own priests. And this chart right here really shows you the heart of the problem. Over centuries, the priests of the main state god, Amun-Ra, had collected a staggering amount of wealth from donations. It actually got to the point where their treasury was bigger than the pharaoh's. I mean, can you imagine? They were richer and, in a lot of ways, more powerful than the king himself. So what do you do when your priests have too much power? Well, one pharaoh, Amenhotep IV, came up with a pretty radical solution. He figured, if the priests get their power from the god Amun-Ra, then the best way to break their power is to just get rid of their god. He launched a full-blown religious revolution. First, he changed his own name from Amenhotep, which honors Amun, to Akhenaten. Then he announced that all the old gods were fake, and there was only one true god, the Aten, the physical disk of the sun. This was the world's first recorded shot at monotheism. He moved the capital, seized the priest's wealth, the whole shebang. But as you can imagine, a change that huge didn't last. When Akhenaten died unexpectedly young, the old establishment saw its chance to strike back and undo everything he had done. Akhenaten's heir was just a boy, and that left a massive power vacuum. So the old priests of Amun-Ra, who'd been kicked out and lost everything, they swooped right back in. They got their hooks into the young pharaoh and pressured him to reverse his father's entire revolution. And the proof that they succeeded is right there in the boy king's famous name, Tutankhamun. By forcing him to take a name that means the living image of Amun, they were sending a crystal-clear message to all of Egypt, that revolution is over and the old gods, and more importantly, their priests, were back in charge. So, after all that turmoil, Egypt's power gets reestablished by one of its most famous pharaohs ever, Ramesses II. We know him as Ramesses the Great, but honestly, a more accurate title might be Ramesses the Great Propagandist. One historian described him as having the highest desire for self-display in world history. And yeah, it's really hard to argue with that. This guy was obsessed with his legacy, building enormous statues and temples to himself all across Egypt. His temple at Abu Simbel is the perfect example. It's got 4 gigantic statues of, well, of him, and inside, the walls are carved to show his glorious victory over the Hittites. The only little problem? Records from the Hittites suggest the battle was a draw, at best. He literally rewrote history in stone. It's a perfect example of ancient fake news. But even the powerful New Kingdom couldn't last forever. After Ramesses, Egypt started a long, slow period of decline, and that made it vulnerable to wave after wave of invasions from foreign powers. And for the next 1,000 years, it was just a cycle of being conquered, first by the Hyksos, then the Persians. Then Alexander the Great rolled through, which led to a Greek dynasty ruling Egypt for centuries. This long decline just left the once mighty empire totally vulnerable to its final conquerors. The end of the story came with its most famous ruler, Cleopatra VII. She was the last pharaoh of an independent Egypt. After she was defeated in a Roman civil war, that was it. Egypt was swallowed up by the Roman Empire. And just like that, 3,000 years and 30 dynasties of pharaonic rule came to a final end. So we'll leave you with this final thought. The word Orient, which people used for centuries to describe this region, just means east in Latin, as in east of Europe. It's a small thing, but it's a powerful reminder that so much of the history we learn is told from a very specific point of view. So the question to always keep in the back of your mind is, whose story is this, really? And who's the one telling it?